of all, potatoes, all that starch, all the carbohydrates, not real great for you. But, so I went into a butcher shop for the first time in my life and bought meat. I bought 2 pounds of lamb chunks because I was going to make a lamb curry for my parents for Christmas Eve lunch. I had never cooked lamb before. I've only eaten it a handful of times. I can certainly count that on one hand, not two. Anyways, I'd never been in a butcher shop before. I'd never bought meat like that. As a matter of fact, up until that moment, I had only ever bought chicken breasts, boneless, skinless chicken breasts at the grocery store, and I'd only done that a couple of times. So I walked through the door. The place is called Belmont Butchery, and it's like walking into the 1950s. It was such a throwback, and the place was just crammed full of people. It was a Saturday morning. 821 Bakery Cafe, that place is fantastic. So I walk into the Belmont Butchery and step back into 1954. I fully expected to see, you remember Alice from the Brady Bunch? Alice was the housekeeper, the maid cook, confidant, and her boyfriend was a butcher, and now I can't remember his name. Sam the butcher. Oh, we're not going to turn. We're going to keep going straight. Oh, I got to get out of the lane with the parked cars. Hey, there's a motorcycle. Well, it might be a scooter, but still. Motorized, 2 wheels. He's a motorcycle. Anyway, Sam the butcher. I expected to see Sam behind the counter. I was a little disappointed, I'm not going to lie, that Sam was not the name of the guy behind the counter. And a young lady helped me. Her name was not Alice. And I confessed straight up to her, hey, bud, how's it going? I confessed to her straight up that I had no idea what I was doing. And she said, that's okay. I'll help you anyways. That's literally what she said. And I said, I'm going to make a lamb curry. And she said, great. Do you want chunks or do you want chops? Now, I do know what the difference between a chunk and a chop is. And I said, I would like chunks. She said, great. How much do you need? And I said, I don't know. How much do I need? So I told her I was going to feed 3 people, and I wanted to have a good amount of leftovers. And she said, I suggest 2 pounds then. So I got 2 pounds of lamb chunks at $15 a pound. So I was a little stunned at how expensive the meat was. But I will tell you this. For somebody, oh, that's a really dangerous corner, who has never cooked lamb in their life and only eaten it a handful of times, I was absolutely blown away by the quality of the lamb that I got from the Belmont Butchery. It was 100% fantastic. And the curry that I made for my folks was astonishingly good. Now, I'm not just saying that. Guy's got a high hater license plate on him, on his motorized wheelchair. At any rate, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So I made this lamb curry. And my folks don't eat Indian food, and my family doesn't eat meat. So I did it with potatoes and carrots and Indian spices, ginger. Well, ginger's not a spice, but turmeric, coriander, cardamom, all that kind of stuff. And I did the base of the curry I did in the crock pot and let that run overnight. I put it on about 1 o'clock in the morning. So I did the base of the curry in the crock pot, no onions because my daughter doesn't like onions. And then I did the lamb part of the curry on the stove. I have 2 pans, a pot and a pan that I use only for meat. They don't get used for anything else. You know what? I'm going to skip the extra cobblestone and go. No, I'm not, because that's a bicycle trail. So I did the lamb part of the curry on the stove with a ton of onions, because I know my parents don't mind onions. Wow, this road sucks. Cobblestones are for the birds. Those guys are working hard on a Saturday. But since my folks don't really eat Indian food, I didn't want to make it too crazy. So I didn't overdo it with the Indian spices. And I got to get off this road. This road sucks. Plus, I don't think it's going anywhere. Go ahead, Mr. Joggerman. And I didn't put any heat in it because they don't. My folks don't like spicy food. So dinner was a success. The great thing about the lamb curry is that everybody got plenty at dinner on Christmas Eve, and I had a bunch of leftovers that the next day, well, not the next day, but 2 or 3 days later, I threw back in my soup pot, and then I added the cayenne pepper and the red pepper flakes and a little more garlic and went to town. That was so good. With that heat in it, go around too. Be careful when you do that kind of stuff, boys and girls. So all around, it was a good time with the lamb curry. It turned out well. I was very pleased with it. It's not very hard. If you want to do a good lamb curry, start with good lamb. Either buy it in chunks or cut it into chunks. You want it to have a little bit of fat on it. Fat is where lamb gets its flavor. And since most sheep graze wild, or at least graze, rather than eating feed, it's going to have a gamier taste than your typical meat. So if you have a lot of fat on your lamb and you don't want it to taste super gamey, then you want to trim off some of the fat. Trim it until you feel like there's a respectable amount. So then that's the main thing you need for the lamb curry, is the lamb, right? So then you want to get 2 onions. I like to use yellow onions, but you can use white onions. I don't recommend Fidelia onions, or real sweet onions. And I don't recommend red onions, just because they have a really distinct taste to themselves. And what you want the onions to do in a curry is absorb the spices and taste. Right lane must turn right. I'm on Williamsburg. I think I want to stay on Williamsburg. Do not litter in our neighborhood. Yes, sir. You want the onions to absorb the spices in your dish. So you want an onion that itself doesn't have a strong taste. So get 2 kind of medium to medium large onions and cut off the root end, and then cut them in half through the stem end, or that's the other way around. Cut off the stem end and cut them in half through the root, and then cut off the root kind of at an angle, cut off that root piece of the root, and then turn the onion half so that it arches basically across your field of vision. So it arches from left to right rather than from front to back. And then cut it into, I like medium thick slices. Wow, this is a kind of a junky road. So cut up your onions that way and throw those into your pot with a little bit of oil. Just get those cooking. You don't want to brown them. You just want to kind of get them ready to accept the spices. You want to get them to start kicking off their liquid. So maybe 6 minutes, 8 minutes, stir them up a good bit. You're on medium to medium-high heat. Then start adding in your spices. Now, how much you like is up to you, but start with teaspoons, because then you're pretty sure not to use too much. And you want to get turmeric, cardamom, clove, even maybe some cinnamon if you really like cinnamon. Not cinnamon sugar, but cinnamon. Coriander, cayenne. I don't recommend people start off with cayenne and pepper flakes, but I like to do both of those things because the quality, the flavor, the taste of the heat is a little different. Salt, and you can use regular old pepper too. I always recommend cracked pepper. You can also throw whole cloves or whole peppercorns into your curry. You just have to kind of pay attention to them. And if they don't break down all the way, tell people to scoop them off to the side and not to eat them. They could damage your teeth. And whole cloves don't taste really great. They're a little bitter. And you want to throw a couple of bay leaves in there too. And, of course, you're going to fish the bay leaves out before you serve the dish to anybody. So once you got the onions cooking pretty good, you've incorporated all the spices, then you're going to toss in the lamb and start stirring that around. And that's when you want to put in the garlic and the ginger. And I used a whole, like a finger or an arm or whatever you want to call it, off of a fresh ginger root. You peel it with a spoon, just like the pro chefs do. It's super easy to do. You just kind of put the edge of the spoon on the skin and pull it towards you, and scrape that ginger skin right off. And then I used a zester to grate the ginger, and I ended up with, well, maybe a tablespoon and a half or 2 tablespoons of ginger in the pot. So that's in with your lamb. You stir it up. You let it cook for probably 8 or 10 minutes or so that the lamb starts to get brown, get some color on it. You got to stir it. You don't want to burn anything. You want color, not burning. Then you add, start with a cup of water, see how much that is. It really depends on how much gravy you like. I like a lot of gravy, so I usually put 2 cups in. But then you cook that for about another 10 minutes or so that, everything starts to kind of break down and mix in with the water. And you don't need to use stock. You can use stock if you want to. But if you use chicken stock, it's going to chicken up your dish. And if you want it to taste like lamb, don't use chicken stock. That just makes sense, right? So after that, you've cooked it now for another 10 minutes or so. Throw the lid on and drop the temperature to low and just let it simmer until it's dinner time. Now, in my case, that was 45 minutes or so, and I turned it all the way down onto low. Like the last click before off. And stir it every 10 or 15 minutes just so nothing gets stuck to the bottom. If you're making biscuits, that's a good time to make biscuits. But you don't really think of biscuits with Indian food. But, hey, we're in the South, so biscuits go with pretty much anything. So if you're making biscuits, turn your oven on. Get your dough together and work your dough. If you're using self-rising flour, you don't need to let it sit or proof for too long. You can just kind of make your biscuits. Then you can bake your biscuits, and by the time you're done simmering, 45 minutes or so, your biscuits are ready as well. And if you planned ahead like I did, and you did the potatoes and carrots in a stock crock pot overnight, then you've been paying attention to that as well. So the last thing you want to do before you serve your lamb curry that you just made, I'm drooling a little bit just talking about it. This is going to be a fun video to post up on Motorcycle Test Kitchen. So once you are done with the simmer time, you take a cup, well, it's a half a cup, but one of those servings, single servings of plain Greek yogurt that you get at the grocery store, and you put that whole thing in your pot and you mix that in. Take it off the heat first and stir that in. Now, if you're going to have a relatively thin gravy if you do it exactly the way I said. And, hopefully you've been tasting 2.5, so we want to turn right. Hopefully you've been tasting as you go along, so you know if you need to add more. If you want it to be have more heat, you would add more cayenne. And once you've put a teaspoon of cayenne in, that's a lot of cayenne. So I recommend going a quarter teaspoon at a time after that. You don't want to blow the roof off the place. If you want it to have a smokier taste, then you want to add coriander or cardamom. If you want it to have a sharper taste, you would add more clove or cinnamon. Obviously, if you want it to be saltier, you would add more salt. The turmeric is going to turn your gravy kind of yellowish. You're starting brown, so with the lamb, so it's not going to be super yellow. Mine was kind of yellowish tinged, if that makes sense. So you've added the Greek yogurt, and you have to decide, is your gravy thick enough for you? Now, I like a kind of medium thick gravy. So if you want it to be thicker, if you want it to be the way it looks, you're done. You don't have to worry about it. If you want it to be thicker, then you want to grab something heavy and dairy, so half and half or heavy cream, unless you're feeding vegans. And since I have somebody in my house who is practically vegan, we don't have heavy cream or half and half, so we use the vegan version of that. So you grab about a quarter cup of that, and you put a tablespoon of cornstarch in it, you whisk it together, and then you stir that into your pot. Once again, you're off the heat. And you do that however many times it takes. Stir it for just a couple minutes. Check it again. Taste it. Eyeball it for the thickness you're looking for. And if you've achieved the thickness that you want, you're done. If not, do the quarter cup and tablespoon, half and half or heavy cream and cornstarch again. Whisk and stir off the heat until you reach your desired thickness. Now, a lot of people will serve a curry like that with rice, but since I made potatoes, I already had a starch, so I didn't want to double starch, so there was no rice, so the lamb curry was just added to the potatoes and carrots, and it was a fantastic meal. Serve it hot, get good leftovers. If you're going to have saved leftovers, I recommend letting them sit for at least 2 days in the fridge, and then throw them back into a pot. Don't heat up your lamb curry leftovers in the microwave. You can if you're in a hurry, and there's nothing wrong with using a microwave, but you're going to have the opportunity to taste and tweak if you use the stove. And there's just something kind of visceral about using the stove to heat up your food, even if it's leftovers. So enjoy that lamb curry recipe. And happy eating. Don't forget to click subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when I post a new video. And as I always say on Chasing the Horizon when I sign off, we'll see you out there somewhere on the road or off it. Ride safe.